Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's further analysis on Game of Thrones Season 7, Episode 6, Beyond the Wall. In this video, I'll give a further analysis on Episode 6 of Season 7 to cover more than what I covered in my initial review and talk about the fan reaction to this episode as well as the implication of the plot leaks and other spoilers going forward. So I have to start with a spoiler warning for Game of Thrones up to Season 7, Episode 6. If you haven't seen up to this point, you may not want to watch this video, otherwise some things will be spoiled for you. However, I decided for this episode I'm more interested in talking about the fan reaction, so I'm actually going to keep this video spoiler-free from the plot leaks type of spoilers through most of it, but I will have a spoiler section at the end of the video where I'll get more into the plot leaks. However, I'm referring to the plot leaks that were released months before the season aired. Apparently, there's been a more recent plot leaks that spoils everything that's going to happen in episode 7. I haven't read that, nor do I want to. However, not to worry, I will not be talking about any kinds of spoilers until I give a spoiler warning, which you will have ample time to back out of if you don't want to hear any of that. So until then, you will be safe. So, episode 6, boy howdy. I'd have to say this is the most polarizing episode I've ever seen. I've never seen the fan base this split over an episode before. Although it wouldn't really, you wouldn't really know it if you stuck to just watching corporate reviews. And on IMDb, the episode got an overall viewer rating of 9.4 and is in the top 20 highest rated episodes of the entire show on that site. On Rotten Tomatoes, it received an 81% fresh rating, which may seem high, but it's actually the lowest rated episode out of the 6 episodes released for Season 7 so far, as the other episodes all received a 92% or higher. And I've watched tons of other videos that claim this is the best episode of the entire show. The popular YouTube channel What Culture, which does weekly up and downs videos for each episode for the first time in a while, claimed that this episode had all ups and no downs. However, on the other hand, I've seen tons of videos that claim that this episode was the worst episode of the entire show so far. And I'm not just talking about channels and sites that tend to be overly critical of Game of Thrones, but even those channels that have been mostly positive or tend to judge the show a bit more open-mindedly, have been saying that this is the worst episode yet. Now, I myself, when I did my initial review of the episode, gave it an 8 out of 10. However, when I did my follow-up discussion with Afghan Tomko and Don Willie a few days later, at the start of that video, I revised that to a rating of a 7 out of 10. And at the end of that video, where we spent pretty much the whole time spelling out all of the flaws of the episode, I revised that rating to a 5 out of 10. But I think ultimately I'm going to settle on a 6 out of 10 for my permanent rating for this episode. If I did decimals, I'd give it like a 6.5 out of 10, but I don't do decimals, so 6. And I would revise my rating for episode 5, Eastwatch, which I had originally given a 7 out of 10 to a 5 out of 10, as I actually thought that was one of the worst episodes of the entire series. I wouldn't go as far with Beyond the Wall, though, because there were a lot of things about the episode I really enjoyed and I thought were effective. But the more I think about the episode, the more I'm disappointed and distracted by the episode's many flaws. Now, I watched a lot of reviews on the episode, and most of them either stated that this was the best or the worst episode of the entire show. And although my rating for the episode is overall positive, I did find myself agreeing a lot more with the reviews that stated that this was the worst episode of the series than the ones that stated it was the best. Even though I found these videos were being too harsh on the episode and I didn't agree with all of the criticism, I still agreed with enough of it to see their point of view. And frankly, I was bothered more by the videos that stated that this was the best episode ever, as they seemed totally blind to the episode's many flaws and were in fact stating that the episode had no flaws, a statement I cannot at all get behind. Now, I already went into specifics about the many issues I had with this episode in my initial review, and even more so in the discussion video I did with Adkin and Don, so I'm not going to get into specifics here. If you want to know more about details on the issues I had with the episode, you can check out those videos. Now, many people have been complaining that myself and others are simply being too nitpicky, too nerdy, and too demanding and not realistic, and that we should just enjoy the episode. But the thing is, it isn't any one flaw or nitpick, if you prefer that term, that makes me think that this wasn't a very good episode. It's a combination of all of them. In my initial review, I stated I wanted to love this episode when I first saw it, but something in the back of my mind was gnawing at me and preventing me from doing so. And the more time I had to think about it, the more I realized that it was the combination of all of the various flaws that I took issue with. I would argue it isn't nitpicking that the episode was hastily written and felt rushed, as if there was not any care put into it. And I'm sorry, but I expect a lot higher standard for Game of Thrones episodes, because the show itself has set the bar that high with an excellence and quality that it's always delivered in the past. Plus, I feel whenever someone says, "Oh, stop complaining and just enjoy the show," I feel there's an unspoken phrase that they're not openly saying, but I feel that's what they're really saying. And this unspoken phrase is, turn your brain off. Don't pay attention to obvious flaws in logic, character, and storytelling. Turn your brain off and look at the cool special effects, the awesome action, the dazzling spectacle, and don't think too hard. This is the message that I am getting, and I'm sorry, but Game of Thrones has been and should always be better than that. Part of the reason I love the show is because of the high intellectual and intelligent writing, so if I have to turn my brain off to fully enjoy it, then something has seriously gone wrong with the show. Now, I have heard statements stating things like, at least these episodes weren't as bad as Season 6, which I strongly disagree with. I personally feel nothing in Season 6 came close to being as bad as these past two episodes. And overall, I'm worried about the upcoming Season 8, because the main thing these past two episodes made clear, even if they weren't that horrible, and I still overall enjoyed these episodes, was that Season 7 should have been more episodes. It should have been a normal 10-episode season, as too many things felt incredibly rushed and glossed over, and it lacked the attention to detail and character building that all 6 previous seasons had had. So the fact that Season 8 is planned to only have 6 episodes in it worries me a lot, and I can't help but agree with the sentiment I've been hearing that Dan and Dave simply want to get the show over with so they can move on to other projects, so aren't giving it the care and attention an ending for a great show like this deserves. I also feel that there should be like a petition to have HBO force them to have 10 episodes for Season 8, but the problem is, if they are forced to do more episodes against their will, we are likely to get an hour-long episode with Grey Worm and Missandei flirting but refusing to acknowledge that they're flirting, and another hour-long episode all about Sam and Gilly reading books, where Gilly just casually blurts out things that ruins fan theories fans have been wondering about for decades. So maybe a petition isn't a good idea. I just wish Dan and Dave would decide themselves to put more care into the ending and do more episodes, as it's beyond obvious that that's what's required. And if they're not willing or able to do so, then they should just turn the final season over to someone who is. But I know that won't happen. The thing is, though, I really liked the first episode of the Season 7, and based off of them, I thought Season 7 was going to be one of the best seasons yet, which is probably why I feel so disappointed by these last 2 episodes, which weren't bad, but still didn't live up to the high standard the show was setting for itself. So now let me get into more specifics of this episode and talk a bit about some fan theories that I've heard involving the Winterfell storyline. Now, there have been several of what I would categorize as wild theories involving there being a twist that it was Arya who's playing Littlefinger the whole time and not the other way around. And the reason why I mostly reject these theories is I don't think the show has ever been about pulling the rug out from under you and revealing that things aren't really what they appear to be. So I know some would argue that the revelation Littlefinger was behind the events that started the War of the Five Kings and put that into motion was a big twist. But I actually wouldn't categorize it like that, as it was never explicitly stated that the Lannisters were behind everything. People just made that assumption. And thus, I think the show, and yes, the books too, have always been what you see is what you get. Therefore, I would find it out of character for the show to all of a sudden say, oh, the whole thing was just an act. Now, there are 3 theories I heard, and I disagree with these 3 theories to varying degrees. So let me start with the theory that I disagree with the least, and that I could actually see happening, although I doubt that it will, and that is the theory that Arya was playing Littlefinger and Sansa. That she used her faceless abilities to see what Littlefinger was up to, and she knew that he was trying to manipulate her, and so played the part so Sansa would go to Littlefinger and he would think what he was doing was working when really she's working on a plan to take him down. And I don't think that's the direction that they're going in, but I do believe that Arya is capable of doing that. I see the show more going in the direction that Arya will find out she's been manipulated and will enlist Sansa's help to take him down. And the next theory that I totally do not for a second think will happen is the theory that Sansa and Arya are working together the whole time to fool Littlefinger. The whole thing is just an act. Because if so, both of them are amazing actors. Now, I'm not talking about the actors, I'm talking about the characters. Because they were totally selling that these arguments were real. And more to the point, these arguments that they had were in private. Particularly the last one where they were in a closed-door bedroom. Some people were saying that Littlefinger was peeking through a peephole the whole time, but that sounds really reaching to me. And there's absolutely nothing to suggest this, so I think I'd go as far as to say that if this does turn out to be the case, I would hate it, and I would think it's ridiculous. And the last theory that I heard that I feel is one of the most preposterous and poorly thought out theories that I've ever heard is that the waif killed Arya last season and has been wearing her face the whole time. I mean, seriously, the waif went and killed Walder Frey, and then the waif went back north to reunite with Sansa and Bran, and the waif wanted to defend Jon. This would be the worst kind of M. Night Shyamalan type of twist. What a twist that the show has never ever even come anywhere near close to doing. And I'd say that there's precisely 0% chance that this will happen. But that's just me. So now I'm going to have to get into spoiler territory for production leaks and a plot leak that was released before the season aired. Not this more specific one that came out recently that tells everything that's going to happen in episode 7, but for the older ones that still do give quite a lot away. So if you haven't heard these, you don't want to be spoiled, now's the time to back out, and thanks a lot for watching. But for those of you who do want to continue to the spoiler section, it begins now. So the one spoiler I read is that the wall will come down at the end of season 7, and in fact I would be totally shocked if this did not happen. However, one spoiler I read, but I wasn't sure it was from an actual plot leaks because there were several fake plot leaks out there parading as the real plot leaks that were throwing me off. But one thing I will say The one thing that's said is that it's stated that the Night King would ride the Dragon White, which would spit blue fire, which would be used to burn down the wall. Now, I really hope this isn't the case and that this particular plot leak was fake, but if it really does kind of seem like the show is going in that direction, and let me make myself clear. If this happens, I will be outraged. So much so, the disliking complaining I've been doing for episode 6 will feel like friendly banter in comparison. I can think of nothing more childish, ridiculous, fan-fiction-y, and frankly, nothing involving this white dragon seems like it could be any more than pandering fan-fiction level fan service. So I have my serious doubts about where they're going with this at all. So if they did do this, it wouldn't surprise me. Although I do seriously hope they find some other way to move beyond the wall. But let's move past this to talk about some of the other spoilers. I want to get into Season 7's most underused character, Bran. So I do seriously hope that this finale will finally utilize him and make him important, because the one thing that bothered me is how helpful he could have been to the Fellowship if he actually decided to aid them in their mission, or how he could have simply stopped the feud between Sansa and Arya by telling them what Littlefinger is up to, because I know that he already knows, because he can see everything, and I still think it's possible that he will. Now, we do know that Littlefinger will die at the end of the episode, or at least according to the plot leaks, and I do seriously hope this death is earned and doesn't just seem sudden and out of place, but we'll see. Regardless, I do think Bran has the potential to be the one who settles this dispute between his two sisters, but I hope he finally gets off his ass, in a manner of speaking, and does something about it. The plot leaks also talked about visions Bran will have involving Rhaegar and Lyanna, and I really hope we do get some more of these. And while they're at it, why not just have Bran actually do something helpful against the White Walkers for a change? For God's sake, just use Bran more. Anyway, speaking of Jon Snow's origins, let's talk about the man himself now. I read a spoiler about him having boat sex with Daenerys, and I assumed it was going to happen at the end of last week's episode, but when that didn't happen, some others told me that it was actually supposed to happen in episode 7. In fact, I heard some people mention something about it happening on their way back up to Winterfell. And to be perfectly honest, I wouldn't think this would be the worst thing in the world, especially not with all the other flaws creeping up. Sure, it would be fan servicey and contrived, but they've made it beyond obvious with their very clunky setups and obvious overtures and interviews that there's definitely going to be a Jon and Daenerys romance. No ifs, ands, or buts. So get used to it. I'm more of latching on to the going back to Winterfell aspect of this, because I really want to see Jon back in Winterfell before season's end. I'd like to see him reunite with Arya. I'd like Bran to tell him about his true parentage, and I'd like it. I also think it would make sense that he needs to let the other Northern Lords know that he's bent the knee and why. Now, these other Northern Lords has been betrayed as being unreliable, weak weasels that could turn on anyone in a second, and are likely not going to be happy at all with him bending the knee. But I do feel the simple argument Jon would have against them wanting to keep the North an independent nation would be, well, what do you want to be, an independent nation of dead men? And that they need Daenerys' help against the White Walkers, which she's already proven she's willing to provide. However, I have my suspicions that it won't come to that at all, and that Daenerys will propose a marriage alliance between them, or perhaps someone else will. This would allow Jon to maintain being a king. Although the North wouldn't be independent, they'd have a Northerner as king of the Seven Kingdoms, so I think this would suffice. Anyway, I'm still not too sure about this truce Daenerys will make with Cersei. It seems to me it would need to involve Cersei renouncing the crown and giving control of the Seven Kingdoms to Daenerys. That's what I'd always assumed would happen. If it doesn't, I think I would have a hard time buying it. And at the very least, I'd think that in the show it's a dumb idea. But I don't know. We'll see. Some may think Cersei would never agree to step down as queen, but I think she's actually smart enough to do just that if it's part of a greater scheme to defeat Daenerys and remain queen of the Seven Kingdoms in the long run, which I think it will be, as the plot leaks talk about Cersei scheming to let the White Walkers and Daenerys kill each other so she can come in and take over after they're all dead, and I totally see this happening. So if part of the scheme includes bending the knee to Daenerys in the short term, I could see her doing this if it's part of her long-term plan to seize the Iron Throne for good, but we'll see. As for Euron Greyjoy, in the plot leaks, or at least one of the ones I read, it stated that Euron will go back to the Iron Islands to hide from the White Walkers because he's scared of them. This may also be a fake plot leak because I haven't really heard anyone else talk about this, and I seriously hope that it is because it sounds so dumb. Instead, I'd like to see Theon kill Euron, although it doesn't seem plausible. I think it could happen, and it would make more sense to me. Anyway, that's all I have for my further analysis video. I can't wait for episode 7. I really hope it's amazing and it puts all my fears to rest, but we'll see. So that's it for my further analysis video on Beyond the Wall. Be sure to check out my review for episode 7, which I will release shortly after the episode comes out, and I will be doing a live discussion video with Atkin Tomko and Phil the Issues Guy over on Atkin's channel a few days after. And later in the week, I'll be back for my final further analysis video of the season, so be sure to check that out, as well as many other videos I do for other shows like Star Trek, Dark Matter, and more, so be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.